On this week's edition of the Pick Six, Brendan and Jacob both here with you to talk about a game that, let's be frank, sucked. That was not a good outing for the Green Bay Packers, really on either side of the ball, but one side especially. We'll talk about the offensive woes, what's going on with Jordan Love, what's going on with everybody right now, and frankly, through 5 weeks, does this team suck? We're going to get to all that coming up on this week's edition of the Pick Six. And welcome to the Pick Six. I'm Brendan Dworzinski. He is Jacob Westendorf, writer for Packers Central, part of the Sports Illustrated Fan Nation Network. And unlike the Green Bay Packers, Jacob actually showed up in Las Vegas on Monday night. So we will get to everything that happened in what was bummer, letdown, crapola kind of game for the Packers. I mean, there's really no other way to get around it. I think all the frustration is understandable. I think most of it is valid. I think some of it is maybe a little bit misdirected at one side of the ball versus the other. Not that either is playing especially well right now. We will get to all of that coming up over the next hour. And again, Jacob had boots on the ground at Allegiant Stadium, so we'll get still kind of a bird's eye view. It was quite a hike to get to the Allegiant Stadium press box, but we will get the on the ground edition of coverage of what happened during a terrible, terrible Monday night effort by the Green Bay Packers. We do want to start, as we do every week, Jacob, with our extra point. And this week, you usually, what's your favorite dish? But I think we had a topic come up during the week on Packers Twitter that got some people riled up, understandably so. So before we get into the game, before we get into what is going on with QB1, what the hell is going on with the head coach and play caller? Why is Joe Barry employed? And we already went over a lot of that last week, but why did we even get to this point? We're going to get to all this. But I think it would be fair to first vent a little frustration regarding a former Packers third-string quarterback / practice squatter / one-time took 2 snaps. That's Kurt Benkert, who is beloved by a certain corner of Packers Twitter and the Packers fan base because he likes video games and tweets at people. I think that kind of covers it. And he's got long hair and he's kind of a nerd. I think that's why. And look, I thought it was a cool story when he got in a game, first NFL experience, gets to take the kneel down. I thought that was cool. And I thought that was a great story. And that's kind of where the story ended. I would have been very content with that being the final chapter, epilogue, close the back cover part of the Kurt Benkert and the Packers story. So I'm going to leave this open to you because that's essentially where my feelings end. If you want to take us through what old Kurt's been doing, Mr. Fantasy Football in bio himself, Kurt Benkert's been up to, I'd love to take the floor here and lead us off.
Yeah, the story also was cool because he befriended my friend and friend of the program, Paul Brettel, which was part of it. So when Kurt was in town, he went and had dinner at the Brettel house, which then in turn started with how I ended up eating the Brettel chicken wing. So I guess I owe that to him. That's essentially where the cool part ended. I don't almost never understand why there's so much love for a player that will never play and you never want to play. Like when Kurt Benkert was in Green Bay, the backup was Jordan Love, who is the quarterback of the present and maybe the future. And, when Kurt was here, it was Aaron Rodgers, 4-time league MVP, back-to-back reigning league MVP. And when Benkert got cut, it was kind of weird timing. And then I remember this weird meltdown that the internet had when they caught him, and how could they do this? Just all the stuff that came with that. And it was all weird. And Kurt Benkert was a waste of a third quarterback, in my opinion, is almost always a waste of a roster spot, especially with the new rules and everything like that now. But even then, when they didn't exist, it was if he plays, you're probably screwed anyways. Then when he got released, he later made some comment on Twitter, and I tried to find the tweet and I couldn't. I didn't look particularly hard either. So you guys are just going to have to trust me on this. But he had said something along the lines of like, my extracurricular activities or outside interests were not well received within the Packers organization, and kind of tried to make it sound like the reason that he got released was because he was interested in those things, which completely ignores the fact that if Aaron Rodgers had a boatload of outside interests.
Oh, what are those, Jacob? What sort of things are Aaron Rodgers interested in off the field?
Drugs. So, but Aaron has outside interests. Rashawn Gary has outside, like, a lot of good players have outside interests. I didn't like the way that he framed it, basically as if I wasn't interested in these things, I would have never gotten cut. Which, okay, whatever. I've moved on, from everything like that. And then he has this nonsense on a podcast. Here's the thing. I understand. I haven't liked every manager I've worked for. I work for Todd Varney now, for God's sakes, and nobody's going to claim to like him, at least not openly. Speaking of, not everybody's going to like the person they work for. And that's fine. He doesn't have to like Matt LaFleur. I don't care about that necessarily. I do care that he basically, again, framed it as, I didn't like LaFleur's scheme. I stood up to LaFleur in the quarterback room and went through like all of this stuff to get through my mind. And then between that and my other interests and telling the social media team that they suck, which is another topic, which I sincerely don't understand why people care about what the Packers social media team does, but that's another topic for another day. The reality of the situation, and now the thing that really bothers me the most about it is the people that are taking his word as like gospel.
Yeah.
And like, oh, well, see, thanks for the insight, Kurt. Yeah, Matt's scheme is stale and he doesn't know how to manage players, and the Packers treat players poorly. Based on one player who was a third string player, has not made a 53-man roster since being released, I do believe, was in the XFL for about 5 minutes. He's a nobody, football speaking. And again, I know that if Kurt sees this, maybe he could come back and say that he's accomplished more in his life than I ever will in mine. It's a very popular quote for athletes to throw out. Fine and dandy, Kurt. I really don't give a damn what you have to say about my life or anything like that if he does happen to see something and say something about this. But it's the fact that, again, it's being treated as gospel, and like, he was a bad player who sounded upset that he got coached hard. Let me give you some insight, friends. The NFL is a man's league. This is a big boys league, big girls league now too. We've got coaches and stuff like that too. They're going to tell you when you suck, and they're not going to say, hey, it's okay, buddy, get him next time. Here's a graham cracker. No, you're going to get motherfucked. And a lot in the, especially in the NFL. And I know like society has evolved and everything has changed and all that stuff, but I remember when I was 10 years old, coaches grabbing my face mask and screaming into my face mask. And that was at Pee Wee football. What the hell do you think happens in the NFL? These are guys that are paid. Jobs are won and lost based on everything. Just the constant making himself like a victim for the way his tenure ended in Green Bay, to me, is ridiculous. And it's even more ridiculous that I mean, I guess who am I to tell people what to care about, but that people care about anything he has to say. He was in Green Bay for 5 minutes, never did anything of significance at all, and wants to tell you how bad everything sucks. Like, come on, man. Kurt, you got fired. I'm sorry. That sucks. I've been fired before too. I get it, but move on. Like, it really sounds like you're trying to make yourself into, he sounds like the dude who sits at the bar with his buddies and says, man, I'd have been this in high school, but the coach didn't like me. Like, it's not quite the same thing, but it sounds dangerously close to that. And I hate that guy. Like that guy who does that. Not Kurt
Yep.
Benker. I don't know him. But and now he's fantasy football and bio guy. And I hate all of them out of sheer principle. So
Yeah, on principle.
yeah, I've had enough. I don't need to see any or hear a word from Kurt Benker ever again. And I didn't understand his popularity, and I don't understand the people like taking his side over. And we could be mad about Matt LaFleur, and we'll talk about that here in a bit. But one of the most successful, like the most successful head coach Green Bay has had from a wins and losses in the regular season standpoint since like what, Mike Holmgren, like in the early portion of his tenure. Like it's been incredible the way LaFleur's been able to do stuff. So it's weird. They didn't get along, whatever. Like it's over, man. Move on. Nobody asked you to tweet. Like if somebody asked you a question, that's fine. But like you didn't have to tweet out this long ass soliloquy, which I am currently in the middle of, about how LaFleur sucks, his scheme sucks, and the Packers are old and boring. So they don't like the fact that I'm young and hip.
Did you also see most recently his screed about how great Kyle Shanahan is? Did you see that a couple tweets later?
No, I didn't, but I don't follow him. I never did. And so like I only see stuff when people say everything, and that's cool, whatever. Like he gets along with Kyle Shanahan. Cool. That's great. Like I said, people get along with different managers and supervisors all the time. That's not anything new. It just feels like a attention seeking thing. And I don't understand why we're giving it to him as a whole.
No, I'm with you. And the only other note I have beyond everything you already mentioned, because again, the victim blaming stuff bothers me. Like there are dudes all over the media world, the football world, any sport, whatever, who are like, yeah, I was great relative to the average person, relative to the average NFL player. I was a nobody. Tons of dudes are like that. And that is okay. You're still the 1% of the 1%. You don't have to make yourself out to be a victim when you ended up not making the team over one of the greatest of all time at quarterback and the chosen successor to that greatest of all time, who was a traded up for first round pick. The only other thing that really bothers me is at the end of the bit about how much he butted heads with LaFleur and all of this. The final paragraph reads, "If you think players only get cut over performance or personal conduct issues, you may have forgotten that sometimes people just have different personalities that don't fit with the ones in charge. I'm sure some of you have experienced this before, and the NFL is no different." My good pal, Jake Laban, he's one of my co-hosts on 580 Sports Talk out in Topeka, where I work day to day. He has a saying he likes to use all the time. We talk about this when we talk NFL personnel all the time. Be better than your problems. Can you be better at your craft than what your problems are? And if the answer is yes, you're going to stick around. If the answer is no, see ya. This is a results-based business in the NFL. And if your results do not outweigh the conflict you bring off or on the field, you're not worth the roster spot. You're not worth the time. You're not worth the money. That just is what it is. It's a cutthroat business.
And I did appreciate, I guess, enough that Benker did say, like, I was an expendable practice squad player or something like that. So, okay, so you do have some self-awareness in regards to, what you were on the roster.
That explains it right there. Like, okay, you were butting heads with Matt LaFleur. That tough. Like, people butt heads with their coach all the time, but you're not better than your problems, dude. You're drafted, practice squad journeyman for a reason. And congrats on making it to the NFL and getting, whatever pension you get for making 2 appearances, 2 snaps in a game. But that chill, just chill out, man. All right. That's essentially what it comes down to. Like,
Can
chill
we
out.
talk about real football players now?
Yeah, talk about guys who, well, at least for now, are employed by an NFL team. Look, man, Monday Night Blue, that sucked. Yeah. And I think everything that can be added to the discourse, I think, has already been put out there over the last 24 hours. You've got the people who are just never going to, they hitched their wagon to Jordan Love for one reason or another while he was the backup. Either it was right after he got drafted, or it was, because they hate Aaron Rodgers now, or any number of reasons. Never, ever say anything negative, and nothing is his fault, and it's everybody else's fault. You've got that camp. You've got the camp that this is over. Love is a bust. It's never going to work. Fire LaFleur, more like LaFraud. I saw that. I can't even tell you how many times on Monday night. You've got that camp. It's super doomer stuff. And then you've got the camp that I think I mostly fall into, and I think you are as well, where, look, weeks into the season, the results have not been good, but it is a 17-game, 18-week season. You can say that definitively now without completely selling off everything. And I think, the rational side is generally where most sense is made. That all being said, as much as I would love to come out and say, hey, look, we're not even a third of the way through the season. Well, I'm going to wait until the end of the year to give a full evaluation. And I do feel that way. I do stick to that. Like, this has sucked. This is 2 weeks in a row in which the Packers have come out and laid an egg. This is 3 consecutive first halves in which they have scored a grand total, Jacob, of 6 points. The last 90 minutes of first half football, the Packers have scored 6 points. They were shut out by the Saints. They had the first 3 points of the game against the Lions, and then they got their asses kicked for 100 yards up and down the field for the next 56 minutes or whatever. In this game against a crappy Raiders team. This is not a good team. We joke all the time about Jordan Love's 15 snaps or whatever against the Eagles last year that, he showed us something. He showed us command of the offense. He kept them in that game. We joke about that all the time. But this wasn't even that, where you at least were kind of going back and forth and the Eagles were the best team in the NFC. The Raiders blow. Their head coach is a grade A certified dumbass moron. That's what Josh McDaniels is and always has been, aside from being the offensive coordinator under Bill Belichick everywhere in his career. This should never have happened. We clipped it from the show last week and tweeted it out after last week's show. If the Packers cannot come out and find a way to move the ball consistently against this Raiders defense, which I believe going into the game was 28th in total DVOA as a team, pretty much every advanced metric near or at the very bottom of the league. If they can't move it against them, we've got real problems, and it's going to make me feel like there are potentially, not guaranteed, but potentially some unfixable cracks in the foundation. Well, guess what? They scored 13 points against one of the worst teams in the NFL with one of the worst defenses. Dude, don't say, well, Robert Spillane had 2 picks. Dude, 99% of people had no idea who Robert Spillane was until that first interception, and most forgot until that second interception. And congrats to him on having the game of his life. Amik Robertson, nice player, but that's not oh man, you can't throw to Amik Robertson Island. No, it should never be like that. They've got one legitimate dude on their defense, and he was great. 98, Max Crosby, superstar, awesome player. But good God, man, you couldn't do anything against a team that on any given snap is throwing out 10 jags and 1 stud, and you got 13 points out of it. I'm not even worrying about the defense right now, because guess what? We all knew the defense sucked. We know Joe Barry's bad at his job. We know they're going to play soft coverage. We know he's going to do dumb stuff with Preston Smith, dropping him out from edge and having him be the closest defender to legitimate wide receivers. That's just the experience. This year is about evaluating the offense, and more than anything, it is about evaluating Jordan Love. And Love was bad. I don't think he's the only reason the Packers lost. He was bad, and we'll get to more on Jordan in a minute. But what is going on? How do you end up at a point where this offense with this brilliant Shanahan tree scheme and this boy genius coach and all these athletes, because it's all athletes, right? More than anything on this team, athletes here, athletes there. They've added to it. I like these guys. Vacuum. It should not ever be this bad. And I would argue this is worse than that Lions game. That's a divisional game. The Lions brought a ton of fans to Lambeau. They're legitimately good this year. And hand up, I was wrong about that. They are a legitimately good football team, at least through this first portion of the season. This is worse. You can't say any of that about this Raiders team, and they still kicked our ass the entire game.
No, and you can't even, against Detroit, you could say, well, Royce Newman and Zach Thomas playing on one leg, and John Runyon got hurt. None of that applies to last night's game. They had their guys, save for Aaron Jones, and allegedly running backs don't matter. So Aaron Jones not playing shouldn't matter at all. Of course it does, but not even me as I scoff at that thinking. Aaron Jones not playing should not be the difference between you scoring 7 or 13 points versus more against, again, one of the worst teams in the NFL and one of the worst defenses in football. They're 31st, or they were bottom of the league in running the ball. They're bottom of the league in stopping the run. At Green Bay, they still kind of got their run game going, but not really. If you really look at everything, 20 aggressively
inefficient.
Mid. Yeah, aggressively mid, as the young people like to say. So not much there. A lot of the talk that's surrounding now is, does the team have an identity? And what is their, once upon a time, And by that, I mean 2 years ago, when the Packers were struggling, it was 12-17. And I think the coping mechanism when Devontae got traded was, well, Aaron focused in on him too much and he would force the ball to Adams and they'll be better without him, which was the dumbest line of thinking I still have ever heard. The reality is the Packers offense, since they've traded Adams, has pretty much stunk the entire time. I know that they had a nice stretch last year with Christian Watson, but Watson still has a ways to go to be a team's number one receiver. And I said this earlier today, I don't think we've ever gotten a game where Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs both played well on the same day. They haven't played together all that often, but even when they have, it doesn't feel like – and Watson, I mean, he had a nice yardage total, obviously the 77-yard reception, but I didn't think he had a particularly good game. Romeo Doubs was –
No, I didn't either.
Doubs was one of the worst players on the field last night. And for everyone to be like, why didn't they get him the ball? Let me tell you, and this is just my vantage point from where I was at, he was wearing Raiders defensive backs like a jacket. Like, one of the questions about Doubs is whether he can create enough separation to do anything. And those are fair questions. Romeo Doubs, to me, I think when this offense hits the peak of its powers, if it ever hits the peak of its powers, is, if you want to compare everything to 2011 Packers, he is James Jones. That's a very useful player to have. But the people that were screaming at me in my mentions that he is their number one receiver, man, I hope not. And it's no slight to Doubs, but I don't know that Green Bay has a quote unquote number one receiver. And I don't know that you necessarily need one of those, but you need 3 or 4 guys that are pretty good. Well, the problem is, I think they have guys that are talented, but none of them know how good they are or how good they can be yet. Dontavion Wicks is just a baby. Christian Watson hasn't played a whole lot of football, and he's not, the way his brother worded it was pretty solid. He's not nuanced enough yet to be a true number one. And I think there's some truth to that. And you saw some of that last night, and he'll get better in my opinion. He's far and away, in my opinion, the most talented receiver on this roster. Yeah. Now, that and a nickel gets you, well, not much these days, but you get the metaphor I'm going for there. Mm-hmm. It's a team, I remember years ago when Michigan was starting Brandon Peters as their quarterback. Wasn't a good time at that point. They were trying to figure out what they were good at. And essentially what they did in a game against Minnesota is they literally just ran power, where they would pull the guard one side or the other and just say, hey, we can block this play. And I know we can block this play, and we can just make hay with it. Green Bay doesn't have anything like that. There is no, okay, we need something. What are we going to do? It's just what it is. And it turns out, shocker, just run the offense is not some magical elixir that fixes the problems. If it was as simple as every team just running the offense, everyone would score like the Miami Dolphins do. You know why the Miami Dolphins scheme works? And listen, Mike McDaniel has done some great things, no question about it.
Sure.
But
look at their dudes.
Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Devin Achane, Raheem Mostert. All of those dudes are as fast as Christian Watson. Speed kills. Playmaking. And Tyreek Hill, quite honestly, by the time and I know he's an awful, awful, awful human being, but by the time he's all said and done from a football standpoint, is one of the best receivers I've ever seen. And he's the fastest player north and south, and he's the fastest player east and west that I've ever seen. He is absolutely incredible. And that's allowed Tua Tagovailoa to do stuff like that. The common line is, well, Shanahan's offense can make anything look good. Look at Brock Purdy. Well, I am not a Brock Purdy believer. But at some point, I kind of have to be, don't I? Because the Niners score 30 points every time he starts and finishes a game. We have become so obsessed as a society with scheme, and play calling and all this sort of stuff. Do you know why the Packers won the Super Bowl in 2010? You guys all think Mike McCarthy's this bumbling moron. I know that. So
right.
It wasn't this great, awesome schematic advantage they had. And there was some stuff to that. Yes, of course. They had Jordy Nelson as their third receiver against nickels. They had James Jones as their fourth receiver. They had Jennings. They had Driver. They had an offensive line that could keep an actually good offensive line. This offensive line looks to have become somewhat overrated. They had Clay Matthews and Charles Woodson and Nick Collins, actual game wreckers on that side of the ball. Guys, and I think you saw last night, I thought Andy Herman said it relatively well. I love Rashawn Gary, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
There's a difference between him and Max Crosby. Max Crosby ruined that game last night. And I know everybody's saying, like, how do you not have a plan for the other team's only good player? Well, sometimes the really good players are plan proof. You know, you could plan all you want for Aaron Donald. Guess what? Aaron Donald's going to do his thing because he's Aaron Donald. Mm-hmm. People plan for Reggie White all the time. And Reggie's the greatest defensive player I've ever, for my money's worth. Him or Lawrence Taylor. Those are your guys. I just named the three that I have on that short list. There's a lot going on with this team. I think it is. And there are some coaching things. Yes. And we'll get to those. I think that it is a failure across the board. I think there is some organizational arrogance with their plan for how they were going to have their pass catching situation set up. Like you can't evaluate your quarterback fairly, in my opinion, and more on that here too, when it's Jordan Love playing with literal children. And there's not a veteran on the team saying like, hey, I got you. I know what to do. Like, I mean, what, you know, who that guy was, I don't know. Like something simple to me that I said all offseason. Mercedes Lewis would have had a ton of value on this team. And you're seeing it. Every time a tight end tries to block anyone and a run play gets blown up for it, Tucker Kraft has been terrible. Like all of those snaps that have gone to Kraft.
Brutal for 85.
Or, yeah, brutal. He might be right now, as of today, based on performance, he might be the worst player on the roster. And that is a roster that includes Royce Newman. Like, it's been that bad. And that just is what it like. I think there's an overestimation of talent. I think we didn't fully understand what the young and athletic and stupid thing was going to look like at the same time. And now you have like not being, this is the metaphor I've been using and it just hit me. This is the 2019 Packers offense with Matt LaFleur, where everybody was brand new to it, everything like that. So it looks clunky at times. But instead of a two-time MVP quarterback and Devontae Adams, it's Jordan Love and children with a much worse running game than what they had in 2019. Add it all together, and you have that cornucopia of crap that was Monday Night Football.
And look, I still like a lot of pieces. I think Christian Watson can be a really good NFL player. I still think Dobbs can be a useful player. I like Reed. I think Dontavian Wicks is going to be something. A lot of these pieces. I think some of the offensive linemen can be pieces on a better offensive line in the future. I do. Elgton Jenkins is a great player. That stuff is there. I like the potential for Musgrave. I think Kraft at some point will be better than what he has been. And if not, well, hell, maybe Ben Sims is your new blocking tight end. Whatever. I don't know what the personnel will look like. But there's a lot to like. But it's not clicking. And I don't know how much of that is love. I don't know how much of that is the pass catchers and rushers. I don't know how much of that is the fact that the line has very quickly, by the way, real quick, I put this on Twitter. Some of you, I'm not going to name names because there were a lot of people. Some people said on Al Gore's internet, there wasn't going to be a very big drop-off from David Bakhtiari to Rasheed Walker. I saw your tweet.
So annoyed with all of that. So anytime Rasheed Walker, Zach Tom, like people think that Brian Gutekunst could just take a dump and there's a left tackle standing right there. And like very clearly, not how that was. And I understand nobody knows, even I'm not even that well versed in it, but offensive line play, usually if you kind of know what you're looking at a little bit, you can tell the great from the good. And like the Packers offensive tackle situation right now is a 7th round rookie, essentially, because he didn't play last year, who probably is best suited to be the team's swing tackle. He's a functional offensive lineman. And their right tackle's best position is still probably center. Like Zach Tom, he's had a rough 10 days. He was not good, and albeit maybe on one leg, but he was not good against Detroit, and he was not good against Max Crosby. And like, I don't know, like
No,
I said
I hear you.
I would not be stunned at all. Green Bay's going to have 3 picks in the first 2 rounds, most likely. 2 of them might need to be offensive linemen.
I'm not going to complain about that. Trust me, I am not. But all that to say, I don't know if it's a position group, if it's an individual player. I don't know if it's the play calling. I don't know if it's the scheme. People love to talk about scheme because it makes. Can we just settle that? I'm not saying that to criticize only other people. I do for a KU blog. I do a little film room every week. Like, oh, here's some scheme standouts. Here's some fun plays to film from the previous camp. And I'll look at it and say, oh man, this looked great during the game. And I'll go through it when I'm doing this post and I'll say, what the fuck am I looking at? Like, well, I don't know exactly what we accomplished here because I am an idiot, but I know that. I am a slightly, I know slightly more than like the average person you meet having a beer at the bar about games. And I'll admit that. And I think most people would be better off admitting that because we talk about, we'll run the offense. Scheme guy was a big thing in the late McCarthy years, right? No, we can't scheme anyone open. You don't know what the hell you're talking about. And again, that's okay, because we're not coaches. And some people know more than others. I understand that. Some analysts know more than others. Some former players, some current players know more than others. Totally fine. But we hear about, we'll just run the offense. Well, it's about the scheme. What the hell do you know about the scheme? What do you know that you haven't learned from maybe someone who does have a bit who posts videos on YouTube? What do you know outside of a JT O'Sullivan video? And I love JT O'Sullivan's videos, but guys, come on, let's think a little harder about this and know that it's a little bit more complex than just that. And we should at least get to Jordan Love here because we could go for like 4 hours tonight talking about all this, but that our folks tonight would not be happy about that. Get to Jordan Love right now. I mean, it's been bad, dude. It's been ugly the last 2 weeks, and I think there's a number of things you can say about it. And like, I do not think it was only Jordan Love's fault that the Packers lost on Monday night. I don't, and I think it is way over the top. A lot of the reaction we have seen to it. There was a post, it was the number 1 post on the NFL subreddit today about how the Jordan Love experiment looks worse and worse every day. He's made 6 starts, guys, and I know we're not trying to baby him and treat him like he's a 20-year-old rookie. I get that, but you can't make a final determination here after 6 career starts, especially, as you've pointed out, Jacob, when he's dealing with a bunch of 20, 21, 22-year-olds who've never played NFL ball before until September of this year. Their learning curve for everyone, including for QB1. But you can also say at the same time, like, it's been bad. And the first halves have been egregiously bad. I saw today, I think it was Peter Bukowski actually shared this, and it was from RBSDM, Ben Baldwin's stat, about how in the first half of game here, the worst quarterback in the league is Jordan Love, according to expected points added. He is among, if not the best, when it comes to EPA in the second thing. That should not be that's ridiculous. It should not be that way. It's cool. One of those halves is great, but you can't have that and be a successful quarterback. You can't have that and be a successful team. We had a comment earlier, and it's somewhere in the feed on our YouTube stream tonight. Someone said, I think on a video last night, looks like he's playing timid. It looks like he's predetermining who he's throwing the ball to. Troy Aikman said that same thing last night during the ball broadcast on ESPN. And if those guys are saying it, I'm inclined to believe them, that they are able to notice something because they played the game at a high level. I don't know what has happened other than playing more difficult team. Well, one more difficult team because the Steelers aren't even any good. So I know what has happened in the last 2 weeks to stunt the growth and what seemed to be upward trajectory. Because you heard me say it. I had tons of optimism about where this team was heading.
Yep. And
where Jordan Love was heading. And then, okay, one bad game against a good Lions team, I'm willing to forgive. A week in a row against a genuinely bad team, that is less forgivable, and that is a bigger problem. I don't know what it takes to get it out. Maybe it's mindfulness that you work on over the bye week. I don't know. But you got to do something, because if it trends like this for Jordan Love, it's not that he can't be the guy. It's that he won't be the guy. It's got to turn up, and it's got to turn up quickly.
Yeah, if this is a roller coaster season, you've been to Six Flags, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so the giant drop, that's what this is, because it has been horrible. And I don't have a better way to slice that. And I'm sorry if that hurts people's feelings or anything like that. Because like you said, there are people that have built their entire persona on Jordan Love being the man. And right now, he's not. And through 5 games, it's been, I said after, we trended for a while that more good than bad, more good than bad, more good than bad. Now it's been more bad than good. He has 1 interception off the pace for the league's lead. He's behind Jimmy Garoppolo. That is it. 6 interceptions in his last 3 games. And there's really only one that I think you could say, oh, that wasn't his fault. And that was the one to Romeo Dobbs where he was supposed to come off schedule and then he wasn't. And Brendan's going to go try and fix his internet. But as we're going through that, Romeo Dobbs, that was it. And Jordan Love just has kind of stunk up the place for the last 2-ish games. And really 3, if you take, what would these conversations sound like if Green Bay didn't make that 4th quarter comeback against the Saints? Because if they don't do that, Green Bay is 1-4 and been pretty much awful even after they won that game against New Orleans, we were all kind of like, okay, bad mostly against New Orleans, but came back, found a way, all those things that you say when you have a shitty performance, but you still win. And ultimately winning is what matters. Quarterbacks in the NFL, they're paid for 2 things. Number one, and this isn't fair, this isn't the way I think about things, but I'm just telling you, it is the way the NFL thinks about things. They are paid to win, and then they are paid to take care of the football. Jordan Love is doing neither one of those things in the last 3 weeks. Well, 2. Like you mentioned, Brendan, 5 interceptions are pretty much all his fault over the last 2 games. Last night, all of them were awful. The throw and some of this too, though, is a regression. Something I kind of paid some caution to, and I had read about it. Like Ben Fennell had talked about this, where even in the first 2 games when Love had been successful, some of the throws he made were predetermined and into spots that were not great. And, the Malik Heath stop route that he should have been a pick 6 by AJ Terrell, quite frankly. And there are others, not just even those, like passes that were whatever. Those were things that are now regression to the mean, if you will. And now they are turnovers. I'm starting to wonder if we went back and looked at those first 2 to 3 games, was he really as good as we thought he was? Or, should we have seen some stuff like this coming? Now, again, does Jordan Love get 17 games to determine whether or not he's the guy for the future? Yes, he does. However, if this is what it looks like, largely, for 17 games. This is largely what it looks like for the season. And Green Bay's picking 7th. Quarterback has to be on the table if that is what happens. And again, you could say that's not fair. You could say Trevor Lawrence was bad for, 17 games or, however long before he figured it out. Cool. Green Bay has to decide if they are paying this dude a lot more money than what Trevor Lawrence was making to stink up the place. Sorry, man. Part of the point of drafting Love and sitting him for 3 years was for him to essentially be good right away. Now, maybe he will be. Again, it's just 5 games. I want to stress that enough. But I ran a poll earlier in the week and said, after so many games, and maybe this is skewed because my answer of no said no, find another quarterback. But 51% of the voters said yes, they would give Jordan Love Daniel Jones' extension based on what he'd done through 4 games. I'm sorry, but no way. And through 5 games, absolutely no way. We as a fan base have to aim higher than, just give him time. Yes and no. Because you mean to tell me if this gets bad enough to where Green Bay's in position to draft Drake May, that we're supposed to just say, nope, Jordan's the dude. I know he threw 17 touchdowns and 19 interceptions, but we believe in him. No. I'm sorry, but no. This is, again, to go back to what we talked about at the top of the show. This is a cutthroat business, right? And nothing about Jordan Love's career has been fair. I understand that.
Yeah.
Perform or don't. Because this is a very large team building and financial decision that they have to make. And he has not done anything to deserve a contract beyond 2023. Now, again, does that change? Does that do they hold the pen, so to speak? Thank you, Aaron Boone. Sure. But there's a lot that has to change and a lot that has to start going right. And again, this is a fan base that had factions of it that could not wait to shove Aaron Rodgers out the front door because the insistence was Jordan Love would pretty much be better. And he has not been. Aaron Rodgers was not good last year. And Jordan Love has not been better than what Aaron Rodgers was last year. Just the way that it is. So right now, and that's not for me to say here that I think the Packers made the right decision in moving on. It's just, you got to be right about this guy if that's what it is. And they're going to have to be right because Mark Murphy said he gets 8. They need half a season to figure out what they have. I'm willing to give them the whole season to figure out what they have. But right now, from what I've seen, it's not enough. And, this is a league where if you don't have a quarterback, what do you have? I mean, we've watched teams in the Packers. And we as fans have made fun of teams like the Vikings and the Jimmy G's of the world and the Daniel Joneses and all that stuff of the world. We've made fun of a lot of teams for giving guys contracts like that. Now we're kind of advocating for it, or at least some people are. I'm not. I'm waiting to see what happens, but I don't think Jordan Love should be guaranteed a second season. And I've said that since before the season started. I think it was Isaac Gregg said Green Bay picks 8 if the season ended today, and it doesn't. And he would pick Michael Penix if that was where Green Bay was picking. I don't think that's unfair. I haven't done any quarterback work. Like, I just worship at the altar of J.J. McCarthy. That's it. But that's completely blinded in homerism. That's all that is. So take anything I say about that with an absolute grain of salt, and most things I say in general. But quarterback has to be in the conversation because if you don't have one, then you don't have anything. It does not matter. We've seen it for years. The San Francisco 49ers have not had a quarterback for a decade. Haven't won a Super Bowl largely because of that. They've come close, but it hadn't happened. Maybe this is the year for them. Who knows? I don't know. But Green Bay's got to get better from its quarterback position. It's got to get better everywhere else too, but it starts with him. Quarterbacks are asked to elevate the players around him. Jordan Love's not doing that, and he's making bad decisions, turning the ball over.
So to that point, and I want to get to that specifically with everyone else around Love as well. And I don't want to rehash this next comment too much because I know we've brought it up before. I know you've brought it up before. And if things stay in this current position for the foreseeable future, and we have to have more of where do the Pack from here going forward, we will talk about Brian Gutekunst. And usually not situationally dependent, but a lot of times general managers often get 2 choices or, for head coaches. Like, you have to fight. GM hires a coach, they fire him. Often, not always, at least sometimes, they'll get to pick a second one. They get when it comes to trying on a court, get a second chance. You mortgaged everything for number 10.
Yep.
Everything. You have pointed out accurately before, the other quarterbacks that we have documented proof that Brian Gutekunst liked included Drew Lock, who is not good at all, Jordan Love, and there's another one to it. DeShone Kizer. DeShone Kizer, thank you. Yes, who actually played for the Green Bay Packers.
Unfortunately, yes.
But I don't want to say that Jordan Love sucks because that's so unfair, and I don't really believe that. Drew Lock does. I know that's for sure. DeShone Kizer is one of the worst quarterbacks to ever wear green and gold, at least in our lifetimes. We saw Scott Tolzien. We saw the corpse of Seneca Wallace. DeShone Kaiser's no better than either of those. It's worse than Tolzien, probably. Dude couldn't have held Matt Flynn's jock. Like, that's the kind of player we're talking about here. You trust him to make your next quarterback decision?
No.
Seriously, like, that's what we will have to have. And I know we've talked about it before. And as we get closer to if we start trending toward doomsday and we have to have those options more, we will get to that ad nauseum, I'm sure. But it is at least something to keep in mind. If this goes south, who is safe? Who deserves to be safe? And I think that's something that is worth at least keeping in mind. We do have to get to the general everything else, because I know we talked about this game. I know we've talked about some of the offensive issues, but like right now, and you brought up the point, I don't remember who you referenced it being from, but I've seen it in a couple of different places about how the Packers don't have an identity right now. There's no fallback. I know our pal Mike Kawano said that in the YouTube comments earlier, that look, if all else fails, if all else goes to shit, Davante Adams is open. That's not there anymore. And you can't even say, well, things aren't working out, so we'll just get the ball to Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones is a stud. Aaron Jones is one of the best Packers running backs of all time. You know what else he is? Hurt all the time. And you can't rely on him like that. You can't build an offense around that player. You just can't. I wish you could, but you can't. There's nothing else. There's no, well, you know what? We can great screen, or we're excellent in the, with the quick game. We can do something like that to at least pick up a few first downs, get to field goal range. There's nothing. There's none of that. Defensive on defense. We hear about the secondary and how great they are. I don't know, man. Jacoby Myers looked pretty dang good out there. Davante Adams, when he finally got targets, guess what? He caught all of them. I believe he caught all of his targets. Maybe he missed one of them. I mean, it's not a good defense, and we know that. We know Joe Barry stinks. We know that it's still not good enough, and I need to put my hand up and offer a mea culpa too, because I said right as the season was starting, maybe after week 1 or right before week 1, I told you right here on this show, the Packers have done a great job of trimming the chaff and eliminating players from the 53 who are just not NFL caliber guys. They are roster filler and they are nothing else. They've done a great job of trimming. Wrong, because they've done a little bit of progress watching this defense, even through the injuries, and watching the offense in recent weeks too. They have not done enough there. That is next. They need to do a better job of building up this entire roster. So what do you, and I know this sounds so pessimistic and fatalist, and I understand that it's always easy to be this negative after a loss, especially an ugly one. But what do you write home about with this team? Someone mentioned in the YouTube earlier too, we have the better Carlson brother. Okay. Sweet. Anders Carlson worked out so far through his awesome. Kenny Clark looks like he has been rejuvenated, reinvigorated. He's playing better than he has in the last couple of years. That's great. Casey's a great friend of Game On Wisconsin, longtime friend. He's been awesome this year. Gary is going to only keep getting better as he gets healthier and stronger. But that's not something you hang your hat on. 2 players playing well is not something you say, well, that's our cornerstone, is 2 guys play well. What is that? What do you do with that? Nothing. You can't do anything with that.
No. And
it's just, I don't know what with this team right now, positively anyway.
No, I agree. And I think the pass rush, when you can get into some obvious passing situations, I think is pretty solid. I have my qualms about Devontae Wyatt, the run defender, but the pass rusher, he's been as advertised. Kenny Clark, you've mentioned this is the best Kenny Clark has looked since late 2020 and 2021. Yep. He's been absolutely phenomenal start the year. Rashawn Gary is great. Rasul Douglas is a name you didn't mention, but I think outside of 2 pretty high profile plays against the Lions has been awesome. He gives that back end a swagger that obviously Jair Alexander does too, but it's a little different with Douglas because he's much more physical just as a player in general. Quay Walker, I think, has had a good start to the year. Unfortunately, left last night's game with an injury. But, it's on the defense, it's kind of the same problems that they always have been. And I could sit here and wax poetic about how the defense actually played well last night, and they gave up, 17 points, but 3 of them came after a terrible interception. And, I know that Carlson missed 2 field goals, but one of them was blocked. So defense does get credit for that. And the other one was a long enough field goal to where Carlson missed it. So, I'm not giving them full credit for anything like that, but it's been, good enough on that. But I say all that, and they still have a play where Preston Smith is lined up across from Davante Adams, which I mean, Matt LaFleur explained it, how that can happen. And I understand that that's the whole goal of offensive football, but there's got to be a better answer than that. And Green Bay's got to figure out whatever that answer is. Green Bay's got to figure out what it is. I think I think a lot of people on my timeline go into the game just ready to fire off that Joe Barry tweet. Because
Oh, yeah.
if you were doing the Joe Barry thing last night, then you weren't watching the fucking game. Because I'm not even saying Barry did a great job or anything like that. But they scored 17 points. Like Jair Alexander said after the game, and he added more to this. It sounded worse initially than it really was, but he basically said, I guess we got to make it so the opposing offense doesn't score any touchdowns. And then he said, we got to be critical. We got to carry the team, all that, all that kind of stuff. And the defense through 5 games, and I know they've had some really low moments too. They've given up 200 rushing yards twice. I am not here to tell you this is the 1996 Green Bay Packers defense standing over there, but they've been the better of the 2 units by a pretty significant margin, I would say, as well, through 5 games. Now, that's not saying a whole hell of a lot because the offense has been pretty much dreadful since the 4th quarter of that Falcons game. But again, I know narratives drive, what fans say on the internet and everything like that. But again, Green Bay's not firing Joe Barry in season. Talking about firing him in season is just wasting your oxygen and your characters. And again, like I mentioned, if you want to start making a list of here's things that were bad for Green or problems that plagued Green Bay last night, you get a pretty significant way down that list before you get to Packers defensive coordinator. There might have been a point where the biggest problem in Green Bay was who was coordinating their defense and or special teams. That is not what this is anymore. Like, this is not the 2021 Green Bay Packers, which were the best team in the NFL and should have gone to the Super Bowl. This is not the 2020 Green Bay Packers, who were the best team in the NFL and should have gone to the Super Bowl and won it. But I think there's this interesting thought process amongst fans where if the coaches could just fix everything, then everything would be okay. And I feel like that does a disservice to the fact that, and I know the Raiders suck, so this isn't a great example for the Raiders, but the other team is also paid to play professional football. So it's not as simple as just the coaches should do this better. And I know what I just said about Preston Smith and Devontae, but think about how many times Green Bay got Adams matched up on an opposing team's linebacker or just a guy that should not be covering Devontae Adams, which is basically everybody. But beside the point, there's no identity. The team, I don't know what they are good at. Somebody mentioned Anders Carlson hasn't missed a kick. Cool. That's awesome. It really is, actually. I'm passing that off. There's guys that are yeah, and there are guys that are playing well individually, but it's not leading to team success. Their offense isn't explosive enough. Their run game is not. Their run game is definitely not explosive enough. It's inefficient at best and really bad at worst. The passing game is clunky, and like we mentioned earlier, there's just nothing that this team can hang its hat on. Like I said, get back plays. There used to be 12 to 17. There is no 12 to 17 anymore. And maybe get back play meant handing the ball to 33. But I don't know if that's going to be an answer either. Packers can't run block. And their run game in general, it's not just who's carrying the ball. So it's a tough spot right now. You're never as good or as bad as you think you are. But if Green Bay can't get their offense going in 2 weeks against Denver, who literally gave up 70 points this season, and I know that's Miami, whose offense is incredible. I'm not saying Green Bay needs to score 70, but if they score 16 again, I think if Green Bay, if you take out the first game of the season, which right now is a very clear outlier where they scored 38 points, Green Bay averages 18 points a game. You know who else averages 18 points a game right now? The New York Jets, led by Zach Wilson. Nobody is going to confuse Zach Wilson with being a good player on a functional NFL offense. Green Bay is not a functional offense right now. And that, to me, is the biggest reason for their – look at the best teams in the NFL. San Francisco, Miami, Philadelphia, Kansas City. What do they all have in common? Their offenses are awesome. I may hate it or not like it as much or whatever because I hate the fantasy football nerddom, but is that a word? It is now.
Nerddom, yeah.
Nerddom.
Close
if
enough.
it's not
a fake word. Yeah.
It is now. I'll take a fake word. I hate all of that comes with it, but it's true. You have to be able to score points to win in this league, and Green Bay can't right now. And maybe that'll change, but they can't right now.
No. We get a bye week this week. The Packers do, and it's a chance to take a break. But here's the problem with that. The Packers just got a break. They just went 11 days without a game, and they came out and they looked like crap. They looked like dog water. Now it's 13 days without a game. And in theory, well, guys can get healthy. Guys can get rested. You can retool some things. You can self-scout. We love to hear about Matt LaFleur's self. Work on all that. Well, I don't know. This team, historically is very bad, or at least in recent history, very bad coming off of the bye. And also, we just saw what this team was after 11 days off. Why are 13 days going to be any different? I hate being this negative, man. I hate being this pessimistic. I hate being this fatalist and, frankly, antagonistic about my favorite team. But damn, it's ugly. And that into the Jets offense, which has been the league over week after week since Rodgers went down in week 1. I mean, it's gross. It's ugly. It's hideous. It should not be that. If I like Matt LaFleur, man, but he is as good of a play caller as we have been led to believe, as we have been told, as he has been made out to be. And if he good of an offensive mind as we've been made out to be, it sure, and it frankly can't ever be like this. So I don't know what changes in the next 13 days. I haven't put that on Twitter. Like, what changes in 13 days? What can you do before you go up against another crappy team from the AFC West, who you have to be able to put points up against? I don't know. I'm at a loss, and thankfully I'm not a coach. It is not my job to figure this out. I want to, but I don't have to. But I hope somebody does. I hope it's LaFleur or Stenovich or Vrabel or the players or someone. Someone's got to figure something out, because the Green Bay Packers offense should never look like this with the kind of resources they've invested in it, both in terms of player personnel, in terms of who's on the side.
182 passing yards last night. 77 of them came on one play. Take away one play, which Christian Watson confirmed to me, Flex, that was a busted coverage. So 77, the most, almost half of your passing yards came on one play. Like, it's got to be better than that. That's really all I have.
Yep.
I've said enough about how everything sucks and the passing offense is bad, and I've talked a bunch about how Brian Gutekunst built this team to play defense and run the football, and that's just not the way that you win in the NFL anymore. That's not to say those things can't help you, because obviously they can, but that's just my Houston guy isn't in here to make fun of me for talking about the Eagles, but the Eagles could run the ball like hell in 2021. The reason they took that step in 2022 is because Jalen Hurts became an MVP player as a passer. The passing offense became a thing.
All those teams you mentioned earlier, best teams in the NFL, 49ers. Yeah, we know they can run. We know they've got the playmakers in the run game with Christian McCaffrey. You know what else they can do? They can throw the ball effectively. What can the Chiefs quarterback in the world, even with some iffy receivers and Travis Kelce? They move the ball through the air as well as anybody. What do the Buffalo Bills do with Josh, who has every single weapon you could want? They move the ball through the air. The Eagles, they move the ball through the air. All of these, the Dolphins, they move the ball through the air. You have to be able to do it. And especially so, Jacob, if you've built a team to be run-focused and you can't freaking run the ball. 3.5 yards a carry or 3.6, whatever. You can't win NFL like that. So I'm not writing them off. I'm not saying it's over. I'm not saying Jordan Love can't be a good player. I'm not saying all these dudes suck at the wide receiver positions, because I do like an individual in a vacuum basis. But it cannot look like this. It can't look like it after the bye. And frankly, you can't have a letdown like this at any point the rest of the season, because if you do, again, that is another step toward we have built in the wrong direction. We have built a foundation for this house, and we've got to restart before we put something on top of it, and it all collapses, and we all die horrible, horrific, fiery deaths under its weight. And I know that sounds bombastic and and frankly, yes, that's because I'm trying to prove a point. That's going to do it for the Pick Six this week, though. We appreciate you hanging out with us and venting, sharing your frustration, and listening to us bitch and moan about people like Kurt Benkert and the various other things going wrong. If you missed the show live, you can go back, check it out on all the constant social media channels, Twitter, YouTube, as well as on Facebook. And make sure you check out the podcast version of the show wherever you get your podcasts as well. We'll be back next Tuesday, even with the bye week. We will be previewing that game against the Denver Broncos, which, God willing, will be finally another win for the Green Bay Packers. But until then, for the one, the only Jacob Westendorf, I'm Brendan Brzezinski. Appreciate you guys for checking out the Pick Six. Stay tuned on the Game on Wisconsin. Kill it. Freeze it.